When I was young, there was a fella went by the name of Jacques de Gautier. And Jacques de Gautier, he was a fella that really thought. And he was smart, you know. He was our hope, I guess. And he was, while I was scrabbling to get out of high school, Jacques de Gatineau had already...
I think he just changed his last name.
Well, you know, a man grows. But this is the point.
Yeah.
Jacques de Gatineau, he went to McGill University and he got 3 degrees, by golly. And he went over across the pond to the fellers with Cambridge, and he even stood up to them. Mm-hmm. And we thought, boy, he's going to be the next. We had Jean Marchand, Gérald Tertier, Pierre Trudeau, the 3 wise men of Quebec. By God, Jacques de Gatineau was going to be the next.
Give me the next gun.
Yeah, but he vanished. And I met him, I started to do stand-up and travel from here to there and to here again. And one time I was in Niagara Falls, and gosh, I went over to the SeaWorld there. You know how they have the SeaWorld? You know, with the different fish. You know.
I didn't know that, but okay, yeah, yes.
Beluga.
The SeaWorld, I've been there many a time.
Okay, so I was checking out the beluga whales and stuff, and I look over, and who do you think I see?
I hope it's that guy.
No, it was just an attendant, but he showed me to the place I wanted to see, which is where they feed the little baby dolphins, because I love dolphins, you know. And who do I see there but Jacques de Gatineau? And here he is, he's feeding the baby dolphins. And I go up to him and I go, Jacques de Gatineau, I feel shame for you. You were our hope. You were to go to Canada, Canada's nation's capital of Ottawa. And you were to be a great man, Jacques de Gatineau. And we were all, you know, we pinned all of Témiscamingue, Quebec, pinned our hopes on you. Now that's a hell of a burden for a man to have a town's hope pinned on them, isn't it, Conan?
It is a big burden.
So he was feeding these baby dolphins, you know, and I said, I'm ashamed of you, Jacques de Gatineau. You could have done so many great things. And he said, I think I'm serving a youthful purpose. Now I believe that...
I knew that was going to happen. I knew that was going to happen.
You don't encourage that.
It's like
that was a 40-minute story.
It's like somebody.
Youthful purpose.
Youthful purpose.
Yeah.
Do you get it? Did you get it? Serving a youthful purpose. All right, everyone. Well, welcome to Redoubt. I am James, your host, one of your hosts, I should say, and I am back. I was gone last week, so John, Christian, thank you so much for holding down the fort. I really do appreciate it. And so joining me as per our usual arrangement, we have John and Christian. John, how you doing tonight?
Good. Happy to be here. Glad to have you back. Got some wonderful things to chat about tonight. I'm not drinking or eating anything particularly special, just another sour gummy worm rain to keep me going.
That sounds pretty special to me.
That's
it's kind of fruity, but...
I mean, sour gummy worm? I don't know, man. It's fine. It won't be the most fruity drink on this stream. I guarantee it. I don't even know what you guys are drinking yet, but I guarantee it's not going to be the most fruity drink.
He said with such confidence. Christian, how are you, sir?
I'm good, man. Hanging in there. I have this orange vanilla sparkling water. It sucks. It's not good, but I bought them, so I have to drink them. But, yeah.
You bought a whole pack of a flavor you hadn't tested yet? Man, that's what variety packs are for.
I know. Whatever.
All right.
It's his life.
There you go. Well, I have a couple things prepared today. So, for my drink, I am going to start out with an espresso martini because that just sounds good. After which time, I will probably move to this funky drink here. I don't know whether I should recommend it or not. I've drank half the bottle. It's a salted caramel limited edition from Crown Royal, and it was one of those things that I knew when I bought it. It was either going to be delicious or really, really stupidly sweet and not good at all. It turns out that it is actually it is sweet, but it's, I don't know, it's kind of enjoyable if you're in more of a decadent mood. But another drink that is great if you're in a slightly decadent mood is an espresso martini, which the best recipe for an espresso martini is the one provided on the back of a Kahlua bottle, and it's just going to be equal parts Kahlua, vodka, and espresso. a lot of people go wrong when they try to add other things. They try to innovate. They try to add like some kind of cream or Irish cream of some sort. You do not need that. Simply vodka, Kahlua, and espresso is good. And it's all you need. The main thing that people tend to do wrong is they don't use a quality espresso. So a good espresso is going to help a lot. If you don't have an espresso machine of your own, you could just go to Starbucks or some coffee shop and just ask for a couple shots of espresso, and it's okay. They don't have to be super fresh shots. But anyways, so you just go ahead and add that to your shaker. Equal parts. My normal shaker, I left at my parents' because I was making cocktails for the family for our Memorial Day meal. Then I know there's only like one person in the audience that cares about this, but I'm going to make you all sit through it anyway. Mainly because it's a necessary step to get to me actually drinking it, is the making of it.
To get to the important stuff, I do have to make it.
Yeah. All right, let's see. Throw it in there, shake it up. Excellent.
Christian, how was your weekend?
My weekend?
Yeah.
Pretty uneventful. Just studying.
Okay.
Just studying
Good.
for school, man.
Did you have a good Memorial Day?
Yeah, very uneventful. It's
I
pretty
shot a
lazy, laid
rifle
back
match on
weekend.
Memorial Day.
It was a PCSL match.
No, it was just a unaffiliated rifle match.
Oh, just like
Just,
an outlaw.
Yeah,
Outlaw one.
basically, yeah. So it was
Nice.
pretty neat. Pretty neat. Got to do some stuff we don't normally get to do.
Oh, that's
All right.
fun.
This is the downside of not using a proper Hawthorne strainer. Normally, when you make this drink, it comes out with a really nice crema on top. And this one has just a very thin one because a lot of it was caught in the strainer that I used. So just, lessons you learn. But it should still be delicious. Let's give it a try. Ah, very good. Okay. So that is what I am drinking tonight. And in terms of opening remarks, so today we've got a full docket for you. We are going to be talking, we got a number of just kind of miscellaneous clips, but then we also want to discuss the Magnificus Humanitas, or
That sounds correct.
yeah, something Latin-y sounding. The just AI in general and sort of some of the implications, as well as perhaps some of the doctrinal implications of that particular papal encyclical. And then we want to move from that into a collection of clips that we have. And there's one in particular that I think was interesting, pulled from both the Wes Huff and then the Shameless Popery, Joe Heschmeyer's response to Wes Huff's video on why he is not a Catholic. One part in particular, which I thought was something that we talked a little bit about, so it might be interesting to discuss. But before we get into any of that, on something of the same vein as the AI discussion, I wanted to talk about work, because there is this notion that I've heard a number of times that man was created for work. Have you guys ever heard that expression?
No.
I mean, the expression Protestant work ethic kind of comes from that, right?
Yeah, a little bit. I don't know that it's directly pulled from that, but the idea is essentially in contrast to this this actual error that says that work is a product of the fall. Like the fact that we have to work is something that results because of the fall. And that's just wrong, right? We were working before the fall. Adam was working in the garden. He was naming animals. He was tending the garden. That was a form of work. I mean, gardening is work. And so work is not a result of the curse. We're not cursed with work. So work is actually a blessing of sorts. And so as a reaction to this phrase, you get this counter phrase of man being created for work, which I think is too strong of a phrasing. Because the way I think about it, if you think about Christ when he says, man is not made for the Sabbath, but the Sabbath is made for man, right? Man is not made for that day of rest to keep the Sabbath perfectly, but the Sabbath was actually a blessing given to men to use properly and to honor God accordingly. And it was for our benefit and for our blessing that we have the Sabbath. I think work is the same way, right? We're not created for work, but work was created for man, right? Because we would suffer if we were completely idle. We do need work. And I think that's ultimately what the phrase is trying to get at, but I think it is a more correct phrasing of not man is created for work, but work was created for man. Work is a blessing. Work is not in and of itself a curse. The reason why I bring this up and how it relates to AI is because one of the things that's talked about with AI is that AI is going to bring about the end of work. At least this is one of the theories. People will talk about in the context of like universal basic income. Once we have AI doing, basically running all of our white collar jobs as well as a lot of our blue collar jobs with robotics, will there really be enough work left for everyone? At which time everyone will be doing, some kind of more idle employment, akin to like what the aristocracy would have done several hundred years ago, or something along those lines, where that's going to be like everyone. Now, there's a couple questions here. One is that a realistic picture of the future? And no one really knows. So that's kind of question number one. Question number two is that a desirable thing? Is that something that would actually be, should we, if that was to happen and we actually did not need to work in order to provide for our family, should we still work, and what would that actually look like? So I want to just I have some answers and some further thoughts, but I want to just kind of throw that out in terms of what you guys are thinking about that whole discussion, because we haven't really talked about that on this show.
Right. So it's kind of like the work would just change, though, wouldn't it? Because isn't this the concept of a very famous science fiction book where the machines get so advanced and whatnot that humans basically just think all day, and that's their entire job, is just kind of think and to catalog and to explore and to do all this. And eventually it's like a pseudo scientific explanation of the origin of the universe, because eventually they figure out everything because they collect all the data in the universe, so to speak. And then it essentially just starts with the Big Bang. So it's like a strange retelling of the Big Bang. But if AI could actually replace all the menial labor, all the white collar jobs and all of that, which I'm not even convinced that it can do that, the way that humans work would change, and it would actually cause massive upheaval. The problem is like the reason why I don't really care about this discussion all that much is because the power requirements for AI are like insane. Like mechanically to actually
Just
make
the
all
work
this
you
stuff
need
work,
to make the AI
it's like,
do
Yeah,
it.
the infrastructure behind it.
we need like 25 nuclear power plants per state to have AI at that scale, right?
Right,
'Cause,
but
I
at
mean,
one point, computers
possible,
took
like-
up the whole size of a room, and now it's, you've got a more powerful computer than anyone had in the palm of your hand. So things shrink and things get more efficient.
Yes, but when it comes to computers, like we're already down to like the 3 nanometer scale. Like we've gotten things so small that it's like we're running out of physics to make things smaller,
Right. Well,
So
now
there
it's not
there
so
is
much about
going to
shrinking,
be
but it's
a-
about efficiency. It's about can we produce the computing power more efficiently?
Well, and so for a long time it was. It's like, how do we increase the transistor size on a certain die set? It's like, well, we make them smaller. Well, what happens when we can't make them smaller anymore? It's
Right.
like, well, maybe the architecture. Now it's like, well, we do 3D. So if you like the 3D CPUs, it's like, well, now we stack it really tall.
Right.
So it's like, it's not any. It's denser, yes, because we're now stacking it, but it's not actually
Geometry
like
is
more
still at
size
play.
efficient. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in terms of the technical side of it, I don't have too many thoughts. Like I don't have predictions. I don't know exactly where it's going. I do think that things are going to improve in ways or going to change in ways, whether they're improvements or not, far beyond what we can really imagine. I think that certainly if we were to try to make a bunch of predictions, they certainly would not line up perfectly. A couple of them might, but it would be more happenstance. So I think there's not tons of profit in trying to make exact predictions. However, in terms of the work question specifically, one thing that I've thought about is a lot of people bristle at this idea of basically not needing to work in order to provide for yourself or in order to eat. But I do wonder if that is actually that radical of a concept, in the sense that there was a time, several hundred years ago, where if you didn't work, you wouldn't eat and you would die. Whereas now you can actually get by. You can survive without doing like any work, right? Like we basically have a society where in our first world countries, we don't really have hunger. Our homeless people are fat, and have an obesity problem. So in many ways, we've already actually reached this point where one can simply get the bare minimum without doing like any work. And so all that we're really going to see going forward, what I predict as a very general prediction, is that standard of the bare minimum, right? There was a time when the bare minimum would have been like just you die, but now the bare minimum is the bare minimum standard of living is actually, living in a kind of crappy house, getting your
The pod and the bugs.
your unemployment checks or whatever, yeah, and you're still making it in a way that would have actually been somewhat luxurious hundreds of years ago. And so I think that bare minimum standard of living is going to continue to rise, but there will still be the opportunity for people to excel far beyond that, at which point work will still be very profitable and worth your while. And so I think there will always be practical outlets for work, for the man's desire to work, and for us to make use of the blessing of our ingenuity and our desire to work as God created us. So I think that when you put it in perspective, it's not actually that radical of an idea, but I do think that the standard of living is going to change. And I do think that our expectations of what is sort of the bare minimum, what we can expect coming from basically no work, is going to change. Where there was a time when that meant you were just a complete, vagabond, homeless, and hopefully you could find some food on the side of the road or something. Whereas now you can actually do relatively well comparatively with basically no work. I mean, even think about people that are putting in their 8 hours a day. 8 hours a day, 5 days a week is not very much work compared to what people used to do. And so I think our standard of what even is a full-time job or what is a full-time gig, what is the expectation, the amount of time and labor required has significantly gone down, even in the last few years as technology increases. So I do think that we will continue to see a trend like that, but the work isn't going away. Your ability to use your ingenuity and use your God-given talents is not going to go away. So that's just something I was thinking about, and I think that tied in nicely with the AI conversation. Christian, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's concerning the way things are heading, kind of to John's point. There's not going to be as much manual labor, and I kind of always go to the sentiment of like what idle hands are the devil play things. So if men just have time to sit around and think all the time, I think that's kind of counterintuitive to the spirituality of Christianity and like the asceticism of it. So I think it could lead us to dangerous places when you're just kind of stuck thinking all the time. But it's kind of why, I mean, in my personal situation, that's kind of why I decided to quit my job and go to school full time, and planning on getting an electrical engineering degree, because I think that's where things are heading. You're always going to need electrical engineers for all this infrastructure. So there's still avenues of work to pursue even with this change.
Well, and I think that there is something very dystopian about the idea of replacing the average man's job with these devices, essentially, right? So even if, as you say, James, like the minimum standard gets raised, it's like the people who are not at the top level are essentially just vagrants who don't even really have a purpose in society. And so it's like they're perfect little batteries for the system, right? They're going to consume whatever slop bottom tier content is out there. They're going to seek whatever hedonistic pleasures that they can. They're going to live almost meaningless lives in a way, a lot of the bottom half, because they literally like have, in a society that has left behind basically all but the top percent of people who can even perform or do jobs that are very technical, or require a high physical level or a high intelligence level. everybody who can't meet that bare minimum is almost set up to just do nothing in this society, right? Like peak hopelessness. And so they're going to turn to things like, whatever hedonistic drugs, porn, everything else that's free, and they'll get they'll get their money from the government, they'll get their, state housing, they'll get these little basically they'll be able to survive, but I would imagine like hopelessness, suicide, hedonism, all these terrible things will be a necessary side effect of that, right? Because I mean, if
Yeah.
you we all know people who never worked a day in their life or tried to avoid work as much as possible just to chase hedonism or whatnot. And they live like meaningless, pointless lives, and they're not happy people. And so now imagine that, but for like the bottom 30 or 40% of society. And it's already a huge problem, right?
Right.
Because we already have a huge underclass of people that are in like the welfare trap, right? Where it's like you need to make $45,000 a year to get out of the welfare trap, but they don't have that capability or they don't have any skills or they don't have any schooling. So it's like, well, I'm stuck here. So I'm going to just live my Section 8 life and I'm going to do what I got to do. And I'm just going to kind of have this is my lot in life at this point in time. Right.
Yeah. And this is only gonna even make the drift between like, well, just kind of get rid of the middle class even further, already more than it already is. It's just gonna make people who are
Well,
like
yeah. What
technocrats at the
happens?
top, and then serfs
Yeah.
who
What
just work
happens
on everything.
when the middle class is the lower class? Right.
Yeah. Yep.
Where it's like the minimum standard of living is instead of like $45,000, it's 80,000 or
Hmm.
$100,000.
Yep.
So it was a good job. What was, a survivable market or even a thriving market 20, 30 years ago is now gone.
Yep.
I do think that the somewhat comforting thing is that decadence is actually a problem that we have plenty of historical experience with, and it doesn't always turn out well, but it is something that it's at least it has precedent. It's not an unprecedented issue for humanity. I do worry that perhaps with this ever increasing standard of living, maybe we will reach new heights of decadence that are unprecedented. But I wonder at that, even because I think we are currently in that situation largely, and I think that to your point, John, there is a great unhappiness that comes with a certain type of living that is tempting in a decadent society, but is still ultimately unsatisfying. And so I think there will always be the good incentives, the good motivation to actually go out and work and do the work. But yeah, in terms of sort of the incentives that tend to trap people in their state of idleness and poverty, that's something that actually does require we can contribute to the change. Like there are just structural legal changes and even things that laws that haven't yet been made that we need to, your votes matter. Your elections do have consequences, and how we think about work going forward will have a serious impact on the world as we handle an even more decadent society. That's my view on it. Somewhat optimistic, but
Yeah.
there are definitely going to be challenges ahead.
It's interesting how fragile our technology system is too. I mean, there could literally be like a freak solar storm and just knock us back to the Stone Age like in an instant.
Yeah.
It's kind of scary in a sense.
All right. Well, speaking
Listen,
of
okay,
AI,
if my fantasy comes true, I'm going to be so happy, okay? Finally, all this prepping pays off.
Yeah. Yep.
it's speaking of fantasies or conspiracies rather, John, what was the demons transistor theory? I saw you reference it in the
Oh,
comment.
have you never heard of this?
No,
I've
I
never
don't
heard of
know
that
this.
either.
All right, so you know how when you look at like computer chips or whatnot, they have like all these incantations and runes, they call it like computer geometry or whatnot, but really what
Mhm.
they're doing is they're using, demons or machine spirits or whatever you want to call, and then they apply electrical signals to them, voltage and whatnot, to get them to do what they want to do. the more complex the incantations, the smaller, the transistors you can get, the more you can fit in a specific area, right? And so by trapping these demons in these computer chips, right, we can then apply electrical currency to get them to do the things that we want them to do. So in a way, this is obviously just like silly nonsense, but it is funny to think about. Like, so AI is actually just demons answering your questions and your calls.
So computer power is just demon power. That's the theory.
Essentially, yes. Yeah.
Cool.
Interesting.
Bye bye. There you go. You heard it here first, folks.
So you
Oh,
tell
this
me
is
there's not a little gnome in my computer pulling like little
Yeah.
levers and switches?
Yeah,
and
I'm
stuff?
pretty convinced it's all magic. That's
Yeah.
That's still my theory. All right. So the Pope put out an encyclical this week on not specifically AI, but more on kind of what it means to be human, as I understand it, and the dignity therein. So, Christian, have you read segments of it or kind of followed the release?
I've kind of just watched people's opinions on it and whatnot. I have not read it. No.
Yeah,
I
same,
doubt.
haven't
I
actually.
don't think any of you guys have probably read it either. I don't even know how many Catholics have read it. To be honest.
I think it's like
that's the
84
funny thing.
pages
Everybody
typed
complaining
out.
about the thing, no one has read it.
Yeah.
Have you read it? No,
I-
me neither.
I've seen some people put it into like AI audiobooks, and it's like 260 minutes long, and I'm like, oh man, I don't even want to listen to that. But it's interesting nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean it's consumable. If you
Yeah.
felt the need to engage in the conversation, one could get through it in not that long. But yeah, I think that we'll just have to rely on the summaries.
Yeah.
But overall impressions before we talk about it, Christian, positive or negative? mixed?
I can't quite make a judgment call yet. The actual meeting where he brings in Olaf and they kind of make like an alliance, I think is a little concerning. I don't think the church belongs in geopolitical matters, especially with that of big tech companies. So
Hmm.
little concerning.
John, what about you?
Well, I mean, it's a pope of the times,
Yeah.
Could you imagine Francis talking about AI or something like that? It's just,
Yeah.
it is interesting that we have an encyclical that kind of deals with the nature of humanity and what it means to be human, that we're made in the image of God, while, we have these people saying that want to basically be replaced, like the transhuman movement from little tech or even big tech, right? This push in the coming decades that I'm sure we're going to see more and more as the technology advances. So it is interesting that he's sort of preemptively rebuffing a lot of that stuff, I
Mhm.
suppose. So I mean, to me, it's like it makes sense as a pope to address the major issues that you see coming in the church in the next several decades, and AI is certainly going to be one of them. Now, whether or not, as Christian kind of alluded to, the motives are purely altruistic is to be determined.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought that overall what I heard of it seemed to be relevant and all in all seemed to be pretty well guided. I heard that there were a couple concerning elements in it, leaning into some of the more liberal parts. I did watch a sedevacantist video critiquing it, and their critiques all just seemed to be rather nonsensical. It just didn't really seem to. They just seemed very grumpy about the Pope doing anything, and so there wasn't any like concrete elements that they took great issue with, or anything that they were like, oh, this is really, really liberal. It was more like, oh, this little nuanced thing, this is clearly a problem. It's like, is it really clearly, or are you just sort of very, very anti-papal in your biases?
I always get a
Pope
good
said
chuckle
something,
reading
I'm
the.
very mad.
Yeah, I always get a good chuckle out of the sedevacantist blogs. Yeah.
So even this headline here, Leo's new encyclical makes Christ equivalent to mere human beings. Like, that's just complete
It's very
BS.
clickbaity.
Yeah, that's very
Yeah.
clickbaity.
It's very
Well,
clickbaity.
the quote that they pull out is like, all right, this does not say what the headline says, so that's kind of a
No,
strange
no, not at all.
interpretation there.
Yeah.
We need a magisterium for this news
Yeah.
this news site here. But the quote says, "For this reason, as a believer among believers, I invite everyone to contemplate in the face of the Son of God the grandeur of humanity that shines a light also on the era of AI. This human face is the fullness towards which history is moving. It is the mystery of a recapitulation, the certainty that the Father has decreed to bring all things, those in heaven and those on earth, back to Christ, the one head. In this plan, nothing will be lost that is authentically human. Indeed, everything will be purified and reunited in the one who gathers every fragment of life, every tear, every authentically human achievement, rescuing them from nothingness and delivering them redeemed to the Father." So again, it's like, all right, very nice.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Thanks, Cody.
Thank you, Cody.
Yeah. Um,
James
just
is quite happy
gratuitous
tonight.
accusations of homosexuality. Yeah, this quote, I don't see anything particularly wrong in here. The article was indicating that it does, it might lean into a particular controversy over, I think, what they call infinite dignity, which they say is an error that Francis has affirmed. And I think, from what I can tell, the idea is that humans have dignity by virtue of being human, and they can't, regardless of what they do or what they believe or whether they're Christians or not, they can't do away with that dignity. It is connected to their humanity, as opposed to, I guess, the idea that one can basically act in concert with the God-given dignity or degrade that dignity, right? Like, I guess if you go roll in the mud, then you have now de-dignified yourself, and you, I don't know. To me, it's not a doctrine that I'm particularly, or a controversy that I'm very familiar with. I don't know the full extent of this idea of infinite dignity, but it does seem like, as being made in the image of God, we do have a particular dignity as humans, regardless of what else we do, that is tied to our humanity. And so that I don't really see any issue with. I mean, that's largely what it means to be made in the image of God, the Imago Dei. Yeah, so I don't really see any issue there, and I certainly don't see any particular issue in that quote. So I'm really not sure what this article's on about. And the main reason we included it was just to show you the kind of things that are being put out and the type of clickbait you'll see anytime any religious figure of importance makes a public statement. There's going to be all kinds of clickbaity articles. So
There was an interesting set of Acanthist article where they pretty much did like an AI survey of the most used words in the encyclical, and Christ and God was like barely in there, which was interesting. But
yeah, the biggest criticism I saw was that it was essentially a celebration of humanity, or it was extremely human-focused encyclical. Well, it's like the title kind of let you onto that. It's going to be focused on the dignity or the magnificent, the dignity of humanity, and so that is the topic. It's not like the Pope doesn't talk about Jesus, but this was not an encyclical on Christology.
No.
That seems okay. Like, not everything you write about has to be, Christology or Trinitarian doctrine.
Now, what about this take on it? Just while we're on, I saw that you posted this, Christian, and I'm like, I have never heard this before. The artificial intelligence needs to be disarmed, Pope Leo the 14th. And then this guy, again, no idea who this guy is. Never heard this take before. The AI is billions of years old, created by Lucifer, called Solomon, aka the false tree of life, or Kabbalah in the Jewish religion. It's literally an ancient AI system of logic gates. In other words, hologram simulation.
I'll be honest, I didn't read that part.
Like a Mad Lib.
Now listen, every 3 words is not related to the previous 3 words. It is like Lucifer, Solomon, false tree of life, Kabbalah, logic gates, hologram simulation. Okay, all right, yeah. Now, I think the Pope has made it clear on his stance on AI is that it should not be used in like weapons and whatnot, in terms of like making the decision to kill someone. But I don't really know what the distinction is in that, considering that like almost every intelligent munition that we have already uses some sort of computational system for either direction, targeting, like
Mhm.
all of this stuff. The decision to fire it is the same thing as the decision to like if a drone is in the air using AI to detect targets and eliminate them, it's still some human's decision to put that AI in that place to make the decision, right?
Yeah,
It's never operating purely off of its own like cognizance, right? It's
sure.
always being implemented by some human.
I think the stance on AI from the church is very similar, as far as like nuclear power and nuclear weapons and whatnot. Like the power should be used in the capacity for good and not harming others in a sense. So
The church's complex position: do good things, not bad things.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But it's
Highly
funny. I think the
nuanced.
Pope says like he was very adamant, like AI needs to be disarmed. Some guys just like instructions unclear. Bought an FPV drone, some fertilizer, went to the nearest data center.
Yeah, that might get you arrested. Speaking of people doing crazy things, there was another shooting at the White House, right?
Yes,
I-
a young Yakubian man. He alleges he's Jesus Christ, but we can put that to the side for the time being. I don't think that that's quite accurate. Although, actually, I think today we can rule out that possibility because he died 3 days ago. I haven't seen any news
Still
about him
hasn't
coming
risen.
back.
Yeah.
So I think it's verified as of now that he is in fact not not the Messiah.
Wait, so another
Really
recent
cool
one from the one that happened like a week ago?
I think it happened on Saturday, didn't it? There's a
Maybe
shooting
Friday,
I forget.
but it was
Friday,
like
Saturday, somewhere. In
the
there,
only
but yeah,
reason I know about it is because of the funny clip of the reporter who is very like millennial about it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, her survival instincts were just not
Yeah.
there whatsoever. Yeah.
She's like, "Oh my gosh, is that
What
gunfire?
is that?
That's crazy."
That clip looked like a green screen though. Like it did not look at all like she was live from the White House.
Yeah,
So
they
it
all
was-
look like that though. It's probably the lighting they have set up
Yeah.
specifically for them.
Yeah.
All right, are we going to get to the protesty eclipse before we move on to the SSPX and the Catholic discussion?
Yeah, which clips are you talking about? The two
The
silly ones.
the silly
there's-
ones.
There's
I
some
didn't know if we were
vulgar
gonna open with
language
that or not.
in one of them, so I don't know if we want to wait till after the
No,
2
we
hour
can put
mark or
that
not.
later.
Or
Yeah, it's
don't know if that's
probably
gonna-
fine.
okay.
Oh wait, you actually call Ma'am Tommy the N word?
Yes,
I mean, he's a
That's-
black man. He can say it. It's fine.
that's true. Yeah. Okay. It's hilarious.
Uh,
I just literally did it for the laughs. That's it.
That's my gosh. So, James, is this where we're heading next?
Yeah, let's do it.
Why
Okay,
not?
here we go.
Why
So,
not? Let's just drop the
Protestia,
N-word.
they do a great job. I'm tired of the Democratic Party making bitches out of our women and pussies out of our men. All right. When Mamdani came on the scene, this gentleman is a Muslim, a jihadist. Pastor James David Manning of Atla Vision Church has some harsh words for Democrats and New York Mayor Mamdani.
Sick. A woman can't
There we go.
sick. A woman
I love, dude, in 2026, we have our Protestant preachers with Cash App. Like, just Cash App overlay on screen. Like, everybody takes online donations. I get it. But, it's just a little on the nose, I guess.
can't raise children. You can't raise children with tits. You gotta have balls. You gotta have a man. And for a man to not take responsibility to raise his children ought to be executed. You have a responsibility before God. And we don't want to hear that. Women's rights. No. We got the sickest, poorest, economically deficient people on the planet. The other thing is this, is that when that boy Mamdani came on the scene, this nigga is a Muslim. He is a jihadist, if you will, intifada, if you must, Hamas supporting anti-Jesus Muslim. And niggas are talking about he got a good program. I don't give a damn how good his program is. He's a Muslim and Jesus is Lord. And I'm voting for him and I ain't telling nobody else to vote for him. The hell's wrong with you? I'm tired of the Democrat Party making bitches out of our women and pussies out of our men. I'm tired of it. I'm tired. I've had enough of it. I've had enough of it.
Preach it,
Man.
brother.
Oh, now I do love that they do have Aryan Jesus in the background as well. Okay, so they're keeping, as silly as they might be, at least they have Aryan Jesus in the background. Okay, based.
Dude, yeah, this is the most base Protestant church I've seen in a while, man. They got
I was about to say,
iconography.
this
They're
is-
dropping N bombs, dude. It's a good time.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. Have you guys ever been to a church where the pastor or priest has called someone the N word on stage?
I can't say that I have.
haven't personally.
No.
Wasn't he the guy from Star Wars Episode 1? What? What? I don't even know what that means.
I'm trying to think. He
Couldn't
does sound
tell
like
you.
someone. I can't quite remember who he'd be referring to, but
All right.
All right.
Well, it can't just be the black folk having all of the fun. Okay, we've got oh my gosh, refresh the page. Why won't you stop? We have oh wait, there it goes. Finally, okay. We have prophet, quote unquote, Kevin Leal. I've never heard of this guy before. But he's let's see. According to his website, kevinleal.org. Yes, press 1 for English. All right. For over 30 years, Kevin has been operating as a prophet to the body of Christ. Kevin discovered his prophetic gift while witnessing to the lost and in his weekly cell group meetings. Many of Kevin's meetings are marked by an unusual presence from the Holy Spirit that causes both the leaders and the workers to have a ministry awakening the same kind he experienced, creating an intense desire within the hearts of people to go from desiring blessing to building, watching to working, and from education to equipping for real life ministry with an intense supernatural impact to their situation and generation. Now let's see booking. How much? Oh, geez. Travel expenses, meal, accommodation, services, honorarium, translation. Okay, all right. Yeah. All right, pay this guy a bunch of money to show up at your local church. I'm sure that will be very much worth it. But also, he forces someone to eat a literal page from the Bible to understand, I guess, or to internalize the word, maybe literally,
yeah, I
when
thought you were
Christ
supposed to bury it or hide it in your heart, not your stomach.
Yeah. I don't know. It's close though. He's got this. He's like in the same line, but just a little bit off.
You know, they say the closest way to a man's heart is through the stomach, but
Mm.
The book of Proverbs for me.
frankly, I think it's about 6 inches too high.
You're not going to believe what I'm about to do, but it happened 15 years ago in Brazil. Eat it. When you eat this, the power of God is going to go inside of you. Go ahead, take your time. Come on, raise the music up. Thank you. We'll get you a page. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Yeah, swallow it.
Very Bill Cosby energy I'm getting from this guy. This is
A
weird.
bit, huh?
Yeah. Dude, how awkward is it to be that kid who comes up, the band watching all of this, and they're just like doing their job. I mean, it's almost like everybody here is just like a paid performer, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, this is a gig for the week. It's weird, but I don't
It
know.
has-
The guy just does the thing.
So many of these services feel like watching a state fair. What do you call it? Not ventriloquist. What
Reenactment?
No,
Or-
the people who control other people. Why am I blanking on this word?
I know what you're talking about. Hypnotist.
Yeah, you make them fall asleep. Why am I?
It's a hypnotist, isn't it?
What's that?
Hypnotist.
Hypnotist. Yes, there you go. Hypnotist. Yeah, it feels like when you watch one of those like low rent hypnotist shows where it's clear that he's not actually putting people to sleep. Like everyone is just sort of like trying to play along. You see the people that are just too embarrassed to like contradict what he's telling them to do. I feel like that's the same energy that these services give off.
Wait,
Just
I'm
blow
sorry.
at
Did he
him?
spit? Did he? Because we've seen the guys where they do like the machine gun Holy Spirit and the other things. I think that was like our first episode we ever did was on wacky, people throwing around the Holy Spirit, and it like hits people and makes them fall over. So maybe he's just blowing on them to transfer the Holy Spirit or spitting on him. Oh, did they have somebody behind him to try and catch him? Is this guy like ready
Yeah.
to catch him?
In case.
His face, guys. Begin to scream wisdom to build. Again. Again. Swallow it. The power of God's coming on you. The power of God's coming on you. The power of God's coming on you. Swallow it. You want some water? Give me my water.
Chokes and dies. It's like in front of everybody. Imagine the last words you hear is the power of God's power. You swallow it.
Rather anticlimactic.
Father, mark him for the rest of his life for wisdom. It's coming over your whole body right now. Raise the music up. It's coming on. Just receive it right now, son. This is a life-changing anointing just happening to you. I see you with houses before other people have houses.
What's the way to a young man's heart in 2026? The dream
You'll
of owning
have
a
a
home
house.
someday. Someday you will have a house.
These guys could probably just completely like deny any Eucharist service at all, but eating paper is fine. But
Eating
yeah,
paper.
not bread. Yeah.
Well, it's like there's certain circles, right, where they think that the Bible is like actually an uncreated book. It's very
Yeah.
Muslim coded because they believe the Quran is uncreated and eternal. So eating it is like manifesting the blessings of it or something like that. But no, this is like peak non-denom nonsense. And I mean, I wish that these people did not exist, but there's in a I guess slightly uplifting note, there's such a hunger for the spiritual and something greater than oneself that people are turning to anything. And unfortunately, there's a lot of wolves in sheep's clothing waiting to devour those who head to places like this, which is why I think it's very important to steer people in the right direction. So, a lot of the drama over the last couple weeks in like the Orthodox or, anti-Islam spheres, basically like this churchless apologetic, right? Where you can just send somebody to any church and they'll be fine. And that's kind of their motive. Just go where you fit in. And I'm like, yeah, but that means they might head here. And I don't want them to go there to that. Like, that's a bad idea. I think that's a bad recommendation. That's setting them up for failure. That's terrible.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I do think that this sentiment is perhaps maybe slightly off in the sense that we've always had heretics. We've always had break-off groups that have done crazy things like this, right? I mean, in the first, second century, there were a lot of these groups, and they have persisted throughout the church history. So you can't lay this at the feet of Protestants. The only thing you can blame on Protestants is that because of the new ecclesiology that Protestants brought to the table, now these heretic groups can find refuge and some legitimacy in Protestantism because we don't have the same kind of magisterial authority to excommunicate in a binding way. We can't go around and burn heretics like they used to, and so it does make it rather inconvenient for weeding out these groups.
Well, I'm curious about that aspect because I don't think this guy would even claim to be Protestant in the same way like Mormons don't, because I don't know of any Protestant, like of the 7 traditional Protestant sects, that would allow for even the title of prophet. Like that's almost purely a Mormon / heretical, like just completely divorced from any sense of traditional Christianity, right?
It's a little bit better than the groups that claim to be apostles, right? Well, see the
Yeah.
apostolic groups.
Well, I mean,
prophet
Mormons do
is a
both,
little
right?
bit
They have 12 apostles, and one of them is the prophet.
right. Mormons do that, and then you'll even have some mostly black, but some other groups that'll be like, oh, I had a vision from God, and so I'm apostle so and so. We've covered some of those people.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's like clearly anti-Christian in terms of tradition. Prophet is a little bit more ambiguous. Like even in terms of the first century prophets, we're not exactly sure what that meant, what that office meant, and it seems like that office, and it does seem like it was an office, but that office sort of eventually fell away, in part probably because of the ambiguity, and maybe in part because of the way that God's redemption works with his revelation. It does seem like God's revelation follows epics or epochs of God's redemption. So like God will do a great redemptive work, and then you'll have great moments of revelation where God will just pour out his inspiration on people. And it seems like the New Testament is the ultimate redemptive act and the ultimate revelation in the New Testament. And then, Catholics and Protestants alike, and I believe Orthodox hold a similar view, where, essentially the canon is closed. June bugs flying around me here.
No new revelation is like the standard.
Exactly, right. You don't get any new binding revelation that it's going to rise at all to the level of Scripture anymore. And so, you might get prophecies, but they're going to be most likely more personal and more local in terms of there aren't going to be any universally binding prophecies that you're going to see. So some Protestants will take it so far where they say that basically miracles have ceased. I don't hold that view at all, but I do think that the nature of miracles, certainly in a revelatory types of miracles, have changed significantly and are going to be they're not at all going to have the same character as they had right after the resurrection.
All right. Do we want to cover the SSPX update before we get into Michael Knowles, Wes Huff, and Joe Heschmeyer talking about each other?
Sure, why not?
All right. So this is something that you've been following more intently, Christian. So
Mhm.
they've been, it's like the SSPX and the Vatican have kind of been threatening each other, right?
Yep.
If I get this right. So SSPX is like, oh, we're going to ordain new priests and bishops. The Vatican's like, well, if you do that, we're going to excommunicate you, maybe, or something like that.
Yeah.
They're like, well, we're still going to do it. It's like, well, don't you do that. And then,
Yeah.
they did
And
it.
then the same thing happened in the 70s with Archbishop Lefebvre, and they excommunicated them, and then they lifted the excommunication, so they're in a quasi communion with the papacy. And it's going to happen again because all these the original bishops are dying out, so they need more.
Right. And so
Yep.
they announced 4 more: Pascal Schreiber, Swiss; Michael Golddale; Michael Poinsonet; and Hanapier. So a couple of French dudes, an American, and a Swiss man. So if they do get excommunicated, like, what does that mean for them and their congregants?
That's a good question.
Because their congregants, if they wanted to be in communion with Rome, would have to leave.
They would have to leave, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
because you couldn't, like, they would not be, what's the word that I'm looking for? They would not be valid, right?
No.
So they have they been ordained, or is it just
July
like these
1st.
July 1st is the ordination?
July 1st is
Okay.
the consecration of the bishops, yeah. There is a
Mhm.
5th one as well. There's like a mystery 5th one that hasn't been announced yet either.
Well, but they're all ordained priests as of right
Yes.
now, right? That's how it works.
Yes.
Everybody has to be a priest, and then you can get promoted. Maybe
Mhm.
that's the wrong word, but you can be elevated to the position of
Right.
bishop. But they are all validly ordained Catholic priests as of
Yes.
right now.
Yep.
And they are all currently within the organization of SSPX.
Mhm.
So what would be trying to understand how this organizationally works. The reason why being promoted to bishop would be such a big deal is because
Only
all
the papacy can approve bishops.
Gotcha. And
Mhm.
so if he's not willing to give his approval to these
Yep.
because of their beliefs,
And what
That
they're just going to do it anyway, even if they don't get approval, is what they're
Uh-huh.
planning on doing.
right?
So yeah,
Okay.
which is interesting because the only difference between the SSPX and the Vatican is that they pretty much just deny Vatican II. They still conduct the TLM, which I think we talked about this last time. When you have the Byzantine Eastern Rite Catholics, which don't do they don't do the Novus Ordo. They do their own rite of the Mass, and that I would say they even do more things than the SSPX. I mean, they deny the Filioque and the Creed, and yet they're just kind of like bypassed in a sense. It's very interesting to me. It's weird.
That is interesting. So I didn't
Yeah.
realize the Byzantines don't say the Filioque.
No, they do not.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
They
it's
retain
a
their
weird middle zone where
Yeah.
they're like, we don't respect or acknowledge these things, but we're still in communion with you.
yes.
But they're not in communion with like Eastern Orthodoxy or anything else like that, even though they deny, the Filioque and other things. So they're
But
like this
they're-
weird.
They go beyond communion, like they submit to Rome, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
They're
they
in full
will
communion with Rome.
right, and submission. I mean, they are like the reason why they see.
Well, kind of.
They're
Well,
just
because I mean, that's the contradiction, right?
Yeah,
Is that
exactly.
oh yeah, you're in full communion with Rome, but you deny the Filioque, which the Romans will teach that the church has always taught that, right? This is not
Yeah.
an addition. This is just
But they
the
are, for
underlying
whatever
philosophy.
reason, they are allowed to do that, and so
Mhm.
they were able to maintain their submission because there's sort of a special carve out. And for whatever reason, there's not a carve out for the SSPX guys.
But
Yeah.
isn't that kind of the way the church is going? It's like, listen, if they
Yeah.
can like have an olive branch to Lutherans and to Muslims and Jews, then why not with Catholics who are like 99.6% Catholic? you know?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
It's like, why not? And yeah, so I mean, I think that they're like, even with the SSPX, like it doesn't make sense to me that they would excommunicate or punish them heavily for really minor differences, right?
Yeah.
When they are in open communion or attempting to be in open communion with like Greek Orthodox. And it's
Right.
like you guys agree on like almost nothing, For as similar as you might seem on the outside, your theologies are like completely different. So it seems weird to me that you're picking on the SSPX.
Yeah.
Right? That
It's-
seems like the contradiction that they care about that.
Mhm. Yeah, it'll
That's
be
a weird
interesting to see
juxtaposition.
what. Yeah, it's very very weird, but it'll be interesting to see what happens July 1st when they end up doing it. I mean, it'll probably just lead to another schism, and that's what I'm predicting.
Why would you get the impression that I'm Pentecostal? Because I said that.
I think that's funny.
Yeah.
Wait, there's no such thing as a Pentecostal Presbyterian?
Not yet.
Yeah.
And by the way,
Actually,
well, I
Sorry,
would
go
not. I would be extremely slow to listen to any kind of new prophecies. I think that's what he's referring to when I was talking about prophecies earlier. I'm simply affirming what I believe is the kind of universal position that when Paul, well, not universal, but the predominant view is, that when Paul talks about prophecy as being a gift, that is not completely gone away post New Testament era. I don't think anyone except for like complete secessionists who believe that all miracles have ceased would say that all prophecy has gone away. I mean, Catholics believe in prophecies. They just don't hold to them as being universally binding. I think the Orthodox view is very similar. So that is all I'm saying. I would be much slower to accept any kind of prophecies than most Catholics and Orthodox, I would think. So I don't think my view on that is certainly not Pentecostal, and it's not particularly novel. Good to see Owen in the chat. Always good to have you, Owen.
appreciate you, Owen. I know we got sleepy last night, like 3 hours into the stream, but we appreciate it, Owen. All right. Well, kind of, I suppose, on that, we have 3 different videos of Catholics and Protestants kind of doing a little bit of a back and forth, if we want to just go ahead and get into that right now. The first of which being the dapper mackerel snapping papist, Michael Knowles. That is a tough sentence for me to get out.
I haven't heard that in a while. Mackerel snapping.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Mackerel snapping papist.
Yep.
That's right.
So this was a funny clip.
Yeah, can you give us the context of this? I've not seen this yet.
Yeah, so if you go a couple minutes back, there's an interesting discussion about Israel, which I think would be kind of fun, but not necessary. And just if you wanted to watch this video in the more context, that you could always do that. But this particular timestamp is about, well, basically, Michael. They're just reacting to some TikTok videos, and the whole video was interesting and good and entertaining. But Michael sort of posits a fragment of an epistemological theory that I just wonder exactly how he thinks about knowledge based on this statement. Maybe it was just sort of a misstatement or careless statement, but it doesn't make much sense to me. And so I was just curious what you guys thought. But it's sort of embedded in this reaction. So they're reacting to atheist, silly atheist takes. So we can talk about that as well.
Yeah, from the Protestant and Catholic worldviews.
Yeah.
Another crucial part here, pun intended. Now that we've juiced the algorithm with talk about the state of Israel,
I've ruined your
Jews,
shows.
No, that's much better because now we got all the views up so we can talk about angels and demons. Keep going.
Hey, people. A supernatural explanation should only be accepted when the supernatural has been proven to exist. Theists claim the supernatural as an explanation for things, yet to date have not proven the supernatural to exist. So, until they can, any explanation that invokes the supernatural should be dismissed.
Isn't by definition the supernatural that which cannot be explained via natural means?
Yes, that would be called begging the question, what he just did there. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, first you have to prove the supernatural to talk about the supernatural. It's like, well, you're already assuming that there is no such thing as a supernatural, therefore nothing would meet your standard of the supernatural. Even if you had something that was supernatural, you would just say, oh, well, it's actually just, a natural phenomenon. It's very circular reasoning.
Now the rebuttals. What is supernatural? The supernatural is anything that is not natural nor bound to natural laws, such as physics. An example of this would be ghosts, specters, demons. The supernatural cannot be tested empirically. This is a false statement. If people claim to speak to the dead or an all-knowing deity, that can be empirically investigated and verified. An example are the self-proclaimed prophets that said God told them personally that Trump would have won the last U.S. elections, which was false. It's metaphysical.
Was it?
This is irrelevant, as if the supernatural can interact with the physical world, it can be detected. An example are psychics who claim they can move objects with their minds, or people who channel/control spirits. Personal experiences. Hearsay is hearsay, and not only I really don't care about it, it's totally irrelevant and useless to prove anything if not accompanied by an empirical evidence. So, no.
Like the atheist.
This is quite the Karen.
Dinesh D'Souza.
Yeah, actually, we've never seen them in the same spot. So it might be the same person, just with a hat and a little bit of makeup. You never know.
You gotta create your own demand.
Well, listen, okay. If you say all the evidence that I have is simply not evidence, checkmate, bro.
Yeah, exactly.
Checkmate, okay.
Atheists do this all the time. They're like, give me one bit of evidence. And you're like, okay, here you go. And they're like, that's not evidence. It's like, okay, wow.
Yeah, it's like if you don't have a picture of it or like holding it in your hand, it's like, it's not real, bro. It's like, okay, all right. Can we use that same standard for any of history? No,
Right.
of course
Give me
not.
one bit of physical, natural evidence for the supernatural. It's like, well, that's kind of a contradiction in terms.
Session. I mean, so what is natural? It always makes me laugh because these people decide like, oh no, we've decided what is natural and what is not, right? Because all the things we talked about before, yeah, it's natural, it's material, I get it, but I actually think it's all supernatural still. Like the flowers growing outside, the trees, you and I being able to talk. So they've made a decision on what they believe is natural. Everything else is supernatural. What these people do, I mean, look, I have sat, and I'm not proud of this, before I really understood the danger of this, where I listened to a psychic talk to somebody in my family, and this psychic picked up a pair of glasses from my dead grandfather and picked those glasses up and started telling people in our family details that this person could have never known, down to the detail of the man who manned, one of my family members worked in a prison. Yeah. The man who worked the front of that prison, his name was Bud, and not a name you would traditionally know. She could name him, talk about what he looked like. She knew everything by touching these glasses. How else do you explain that? So people have plenty of examples that would defy
Everyone's making fun of his mannerisms. He does seem a little fruity, I have to say. He seems like a nice guy, but
He's just a little dusty.
some of his
Okay.
mannerisms,
But I mean,
slightly limp in the
yeah.
wrist. I don't know.
From my paradigm, it's like, oh no, that's somebody who communes with demons. Yeah, you should not be around those people. That's really not good. And it's either trickery or demons. Okay,
It's amazing what you can
your only
do.
two options.
Cold reading people, but so even that kind of thing I'm very, very skeptical of. But yeah, I mean, if it is anything, then it's demons.
Yeah. Well, but it's funny because if somebody did have, like, if you take the materialistic view of that and somebody actually pulled up information that they could not possibly know, like it's not physically possible for them to know that in that time span, right? What is their explanation? So, like, if they just randomly bumped into them and I told them their grandfather's name and what he had for breakfast the day that he died, right?
I mean,
If
people
that were
will
to happen.
when you try to use this kind of thing in an apologetic setting, but people are always going to say is, yes, that would be unexplainable, but not impossible. With enough research or maybe even just sort of cold, reading where you're or what do they call it? Is it cold? Anyway, where you just like look at their facial expressions and whatnot, and kind of like say things that prompt them, and then kind of read it off them. I know that that's overblown. It's not like it is in the movies, but there is a certain amount of information that you can get from that kind of thing, from prompting. Just because something's unexplainable doesn't mean that it's not possible. And you look at any magician who can fool you into thinking that they're doing something supernatural, but there are fully natural explanations. That's what your Reddit tier atheist is going to say in response to any kind of personal experience like that, where you're saying this was totally unexplainable. I have no way to explain it. They say, yeah, sure, I don't have any way to explain the magician that I just saw, and yet I'm quite confident that he's not using actual magic. Same with the psychic. And I think that they have a point. Like that's it is going to be very, very hard to convince someone other than yourself convince someone else with your personal experiences.
It's hard to convince somebody else who was not there, who didn't have the specific experience there, right? Because that's very personal. It's very experiential, very anecdotal to that person. But what I'm saying is, so like if somebody has experienced something like that, while it's not necessarily very convincing to somebody else who has not, like personally, it's very hard to get around like some sort of non-supernatural experience for that, right? So it's like it's the same thing within like miracles within the church, right? Whether it's a Eucharistic miracle or whether it's like incorrupt bodies of the saints, you can just say, if you're an atheist, I guess, oh, but I don't believe that. I guess if you just dismiss it entirely, you're like, oh, but there's another explanation. I don't know what it is, but I'm just gonna not deal with that, right? It's just like I don't even know, like, while I do agree with you that, yeah, that's very experiential and very like meaningless to other people outside of yourself. I also think that they're just intellectually dishonest, and that there is no level of evidence. Like they do not personally want to believe. And so any reason to not, they will just go with that, or they won't engage with the question or the topic, or
they're
the
working from
situation
first
or anything like
principles.
that.
If your first principle is the universe is all that there is that we can, basically the universe is everything that exists, meaning that all existence is material. If that's your first principle, then it rules out the supernatural. It's ruled out by your first principle. And so if that's your starting point, nothing is going to convince you of the supernatural. It is literally impossible if that's your first principle. So the only way to get someone to come around is to make them lose faith in that first principle. And I think, to your point, personal experiences are going to be one of the best ways to actually do that. In terms of what is personally convincing, when you experience something, that is usually what is the most convincing. It doesn't have to be something that is like blatantly supernatural. It might be just the experience of love or goodness or some of these things that are actually not very materialistically explainable. They're not one can sort of surmise that it's just sort of firings of neurons and chemicals in your brain and whatnot. But in the end, it feels like it must be greater than that. And that is actually something that personally convinces a lot of people. But your experience is going to be very hard to use to convince someone else until they actually experience something like that.
Well, I'm curious of that as well. If someone, from a materialistic perspective, if you could show them something that they could not explain, if they would just say, "Oh, well, I can't explain it, but it's not supernatural. It must be natural, and it's just in a fashion that we cannot explain yet, or our understanding of the universe is too limited to fully explain this." Whatever it else it might be, right? To them, it's going to be aliens or UFOs or something like that.
Technology,
Future tech,
right.
future tech, indistinguishable from magic at our current point in time.
Right.
Everything he just cared about that would very much prove. So individual experiences do matter because in the collective, again, they point to evidence.
He says you can't prove anything without hard, tangible, empirical evidence. But he doesn't really believe that, because I can know something about justice. Justice is giving to each what he deserves. I can know that definitively. And I have to know that. We have to make conclusions about that. That's the only way we can have a society. I can't touch justice.
Or freedom or liberty.
Or freedom or liberty or grace or virtue or anything. So we all do that. In fact, we can come to conclusions about mathematics without empirical evidence. I guess, one.
So go back a couple seconds, maybe 30 seconds, where he explains how we can know what justice is, because I think this is completely incoherent.
He's like, something that's like really subjective, and I'm like, well, I don't know about that. I thought he was going to go with something else. That was not a good argument.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe it's just a bad example, but he's like, he says we can know this definitively, and then just gives a definition as if that's how you can know something definitively, is by defining it. That's a very odd epistemology, if that's your epistemology, that by defining something you now know it. It's like, no, that's not really how.
He kind of says it's also a bad argument, but then he hedges it with like, well, collectively this is the only way to run a society. Because it works, therefore it's true.
Which is an empirical argument, essentially. It's like, that's
okay, but it's like
that's not going to be
trying
definitive.
Define what a right is. It's like it's just a collective idea that we all accept. It's not actually.
So he's speaking off the cuff. Probably just a bad example, but it does.
That is a bad argument.
I've heard Noel say similar things with slightly better examples, and I do think that it points to a slightly incoherent and not fully fleshed out epistemology. I think Noel's epistemology is going to be largely just sort of a scholastic foundationalist epistemology, which states there are just certain foundational principles that we can know with certainty simply because of their kind of common sense value, or their the inability to think the contrary, something along those lines, which I think does fall short of a fully sound epistemology, which is a point that Jay Dyer and many other critics, pretty much any critics within the last 100, 200 years of philosophy, 100 years of philosophy will make. Anyone post-Kant will say that kind of foundationalism doesn't really work, but really post-Hume. Speaking of which, Hume is excellent. David Hume, if you want to just get into philosophy, I highly recommend Hume. He's just so clear and concise. He's an atheist, or presumably atheist, at a time when you couldn't really admit publicly to being an atheist. But I think that he lays out the stakes of what's at stake in philosophy very, very well, and does a good job of countering sort of this weak epistemology that was prevalent prior to Hume. And he lays out some of the issues that needed to be dealt with and have been dealt with more seriously since Hume. But mainly, he's just a great read because he is a very coherent and relatively easy to understand philosopher. And so, if you're interested in philosophy, David Hume is a good place to start. An inquiry concerning human understanding is not a bad place to go.
To evidence.
He says you can't prove anything without hard, tangible, empirical evidence. But he doesn't really believe that, because I can know something about justice. Justice is giving to each what he deserves. I can know that definitively. And I have to know that. We have to make conclusions about that. That's the only way we can have a society. I can't touch justice. I can't,
freedom or liberty.
Or freedom or liberty or grace or virtue or anything. So we all
I don't. Yeah, the weird concept stuff is nebulous, and then you run into different definitions, and there's like culturally accepted definitions, but none of that like makes it true because we accept it as useful, right? I would go to like a different example, like if I was going to try and do something, it's like Plato. I'm 99% confident that Plato is a real person. I have very little empirical evidence for that, other than the fact that other people also believe that Plato is real. I don't know if we have any of the original documents. Maybe we have like one, you know? But I'm like, as far as like human confidence and knowledge can go, I'm pretty confident that Plato is real. Can I say that like actually 100%? Not really, you know? Pretty damn close though.
Yeah, at some point, all you can say is, as much as we can know anything, I can know this.
Correct. Yeah.
That's
Well,
like,
and if that's what
if we can
knowledge
have
is,
any
right?
knowledge. Yeah.
If that's what knowledge is just like as high of a level as humanly possible to be confident in something is true. Like, yeah, Plato is a real person.
Do that. In fact, we can come to conclusions about mathematics without empirical evidence. I guess, one plus one equals two. I guess we have empirical evidence for that. But there's a lot of mathematics that we don't have empirical evidence for. So even that very reductive empiricist view is kind of silly by any standard,
right?
Standard by which we all live our lives.
But even that's a little bit confused. Like, it's just not clear what his epistemology is. Because even that idea of like mathematical, what's that?
I do kind of like it because math is like pretty universal. At least I haven't seen, I don't know what the argument against it being universal is. And so you have to give some explanation for even the concept of universals.
Right.
Right. So I feel like that's maybe a better argument.
And I actually agree with the statement that he made that 1 + 1 is an empirical statement. Like, I think that addition and math in general is, we can know it like we know anything in my epistemology, first by inducing to get to core assumptions, and then from those assumptions working deductively. So it's a constant process of induction leading to postulates, leading to conclusions through deductions, which then those conclusions feed back into the loop where now you go back to your inductions and those feedback into your postulates, which feed back to your conclusions. And so it's a constant process, a spiral of sorts where you're putting juxtapositioning these inductions and these deductions. So I think that math actually is we accept it on inductive grounds, meaning it makes sense of our experiences. But that position is kind of contrary to what I would think is Michael Knowles' position more broadly, which is more of this foundational position where you have certain foundational views that do not need to be demonstrated through induction, but are actually just accepted because they're so common sense. And I would think that, and most people in that strain of thought would accept 1 + 1 as being something similar to that, where you don't really need any kind of induction to get that, where you can just sort of know that a priori. So the whole thing is just very confused. It doesn't seem like Michael Knowles has a clearly laid out epistemology, and that's that's fine, but maybe don't talk about it then.
maybe we are expecting a little much from pop apologetics to have a fully laid out epistemological position in a YouTube video critiquing like cringe atheist core.
You create a standard, again, what is natural? You create the standard that's ridiculous to begin with, and then you have a measurement that everything else that does have evidence, you're just dismissing it all when these people, I mean, look, I've spent now years looking at this stuff, and I want it to not be true half the time because I want to poke the hole in it. I want to be like, oh, I caught you, you lied. Too often, I'm in a position where I'm finding myself saying these details, like, do you want me to give you an example? Because this one's kind of wild.
Yeah.
Okay, so in our most recent film, there's a man Bruce Veneta, who died crushed underneath a semi-truck. He was a mechanic. He's under the semi-truck doing work on it, falls off the jack.
It's another fantastic story. We don't need to listen to it, but someone kind of seems to have an out-of-body experience or whatever, and more proof of the supernatural. It's fine. I mean, maybe it happened. Maybe he's misremembering or whatever. But anyways, so yeah, I think that
I think as Christians, it is a landmine when we start talking about the supernatural and personal experience. While yes, it can be very important to the individual, like basing theology off of miraculous experiences or things that can be easily manipulated. You know, it's like there's a couple people that have become Christians after doing an acid trip or doing DMT. And it's like, okay, yep, you had an experience that led you to Christ. However, that is not
Right.
that is not a normative position for us
Good.
to feed the congregants, you know, LSD or whatnot, in hopes that they come to Christ. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe that's not a great position. You know, I'm glad it worked for you, but we're not going to do that to everybody who walks in here. Catholic mandated acid trips. Here we go. The Pope says this is good.
That's right. Just wait. Give it a few years. All right. So that's it. We can move on to the next.
All right,
next.
so
yeah.
West Huff, popular Protestant apologetics, probably the most popular Protestant apologetics.
Maybe
really
Gavin.
good
It's hard to tell. I guess Wes is
in
maybe
terms
more
of
because he went on Joe
size, I
Rogan.
think-
Yeah.
In terms of size, I think Westhuff is much larger. In terms of like impact over the years, Gavin's been doing it for a lot longer.
And also, Gavin does a lot more interfaith discussions, whereas Wes tends to be more out of the faith. Like he's talking to non-faithful, whereas Gavin is mostly talking to people that are he's talking to his own ilk, trying to ease ecclesial anxiety, or doing debates with Orthodox or Catholics. Whereas Wes tends to stay kind of above the fray, so to speak. Which is why this video was interesting, because it was one of his first really interactions with some of the more interfaith discussions. And this video, so he put out a video, basically 6 reasons why I'm not Roman Catholic. It's interesting that it's more like 7 or 8 reasons. I'm not sure exactly where he got his number from, but anyways, it was a good video. I'd recommend it because it just sort of, it does a good job laying out the groundwork. It is not a video, in my opinion, that invited... It is not a polemical video. It's very gracious to other faiths, specifically Roman Catholicism, although much of what he says is just basically, Trent Horn made this comment, where most of his comments are just referring to why he's not insert any non-Calvinistic faith, why he falls basically into this particular form of Protestantism. So he's not, the issues that he has with the Catholic Church are going to be the exact same issues he has with the Orthodox Church, is what I'm trying to say. But it's not a very polemical video, and it's so surface level. His points are good, but they're not deep enough to really invite responses. In my view, they're not something that it's like he doesn't give enough meat to really invite someone to do a full rebuttal. However, plenty of rebuttals followed after he put out the video, and so one part in particular that I thought was interesting, because it's a topic that we've talked about, is this idea of the church's unchanging doctrine, where you have the views of Vatican II seeming to contradict the views of Trent. And there are plenty of other examples, and so that's
Trent
one of
Horn
the
specifically.
Right, and so yeah, right.
Well, no, I'm joking. But
yeah.
Council of Trent versus
yes.
Trent Horn.
And so that is one of the 6 reasons that Wes provides. And then Joe Heschmeyer put out a response video to the whole video, but I wanted to talk about his response to this particular point as well.
Yeah, Wes's forte is like textual historicity, I guess, like textual criticism, that sort of thing. That's kind of his area of expertise. So I think the only other video that he's done, quote unquote, against Catholics is, which again is against is a very strong word, is did Protestants remove 7 books from the Bible? I think that's the only other video that he's done, like directly critiquing another faith position within Christianity as a whole.
Is the idea of the changing in the quote unchanged church. Last spring, I traveled to Trento, Italy, where our film team at Apologetics Canada went there specifically to produce episode 4 of our Can I Trust the Bible video series. And the purpose of us being at Trent was to discuss its impact on the official pronouncement of the canon of scripture that took place on April 8th, 1546. So for that project, I was reading a ton of stuff that was going on at Trent in the 16th century and the conversations and disagreements that happened during the Counter-Reformational movement. And I have to be honest, my experience of that investigation solidified for me that the religion of Rome being argued for at Trent, at the Council of Trent, is quite different in places to the religion of Vatican II following 1965. The theology of Rome.
See, I feel like you can go back way further than Trent, though. I mean, you can pick out contradictions
Yeah.
between, Trent and Vatican II, but you can just also go back to Unum Sanctum, in 1080, whenever that was written, right? I mean, you can go back way further. It seems that is kind of the problem that the Orthodox have had for over a millennium, is that it's not just post Trent. It's way earlier than that is when the contradictions started to seep in.
Has changed. The historical consistency often claimed within Roman Catholicism is simply not there when actually compared with what the church has in the past declared about its beliefs. The polemics that took place during the Reformation taught that Roman Catholic teaching, as it was at Trent, was the universal teaching of the whole church. And that's simply false. So when you have Cardinal Henry Newman writing an essay on the development of Christian doctrine in 1848, he's outlining the parameters of why the claim of unchanged continuity isn't true. The development hypothesis undermines a unified, constant, and uniform teaching from the apostles to today. What Newman outlines is simply not the thinking of those at Trent. It isn't.
That's kind of a low tier view of Newman's essay. Newman is basically he's countering this attack where he's saying that you will find people saying that the faith has changed, and so let me expound on the way that you can have valid changes. And this is a very old concept. And so it's not fair to look at Newman's essay as being some wholly new teaching that, it's actually okay for doctrine to change. So from now on, we're going to have this development of doctrine that allows us to excuse any changes. That's not what Newman was doing, and that's not really how that idea has been used. I don't particularly like the way that he's introducing Newman's work in this. I think that you can discuss the contradictions without framing it that way. I do like the development of doctrine by Newman. It's a great work, and I think ultimately does. It leads me to be even more confident in my Protestantism. I buy into the first half of his argument, which is that doctrine does develop. I just happen to think that I guess I disagree with him on the criteria of what would indicate valid versus invalid developments, and I do think that the Protestant Revolution or Reformation, however you want to call it, was a valid development, specifically in its ecclesiology and its view of sola scriptura, which is really just an outgrowth of the ecclesiology, the rejecting of the view of the church as being a earthly institution as it was formerly conceived. So I do think that I really like that essay, and I would recommend it to anyone, especially the first half. The second half goes into a more detailed intra-Catholic discussion, but the purpose, what Newman was trying to do, was essentially counter this attack against Catholicism that you have popes against popes and councils against councils. And he makes a good argument, but I think that it might even go too far, where he proves too much in opening the door for development.
Well, it's like twofold, right? Because first off, like any cardinal or bishop or priest within the Catholic Church can, no matter how respected, is not dogma, right? According to the Catholic system. So if you can find somebody that wrote a letter or a paper or an article and it might seem to contradict Catholic teaching in other areas, it's not really that relevant. Newman is trying to kind of rationalize, right, exterior critiques of what appears to be outright contradictions which is like the problem in and of itself. The fact that you're trying to rationalize these differences and explain them in a way that is not contradictory is like, the meme about mental gymnastics. The one character is like, yeah, this has changed. And the other guy is like, well, actually, if you view it through this lens and this lens, it either hasn't changed or it has changed, but this time it's fine. Right.
Right.
So, I mean, it's like on one hand, though, he's like, again, for any faith, if you have any person in that faith, if they say something stupid, it's not like this is the kill shot. I've got Newman on record saying something contradictory. So therefore, haha, BTFO'd all Catholics. Like that would also be a really low tier critique.
Right.
They would not have agreed with Cardinal Henry Newman's thesis. On paper, the claim of continuance and unchanged succession sounds great, but at a deeper inspection, it's just simply not true. And a simple example of this is that the medieval church taught that submission to the Bishop of Rome, the Pope, was a matter of salvation. It was salvific. The papal bull Unum Sanctum, issued by Pope Boniface in 1303, stated, quote, "We declare, affirm, define, and pronounce that it is absolutely necessary to salvation that every human creature should be subject to the Roman pontiff."
See, that's the one quote where it's like, if that is true, how do we interpret Vatican II in light of this?
Yep.
And that's where it's like Pope against Pope.
It's even funny what they've said about Muslims back then too. I mean, they called them faithless, they called them antichrist, they called them demon worshippers, and then now Vatican II saying they worship the same God as us.
It was anathema to pray in a synagogue. You could not pray in a mosque. You could not pray towards Mecca. The last three popes have done all of those things. It's like the popes of the medieval second millennium would have excommunicated the last three popes.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you could say, oh, well, Muslims of today are different than Muslims of back then because they're no longer warring. Oh, well, that's not true. They're no longer trying to advance their ideology. Oh, that's not true. It's like, sure, the geopolitics has changed, but the religion hasn't. So, I mean, I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you can explain this away with a view of development of doctrine. Like there are ways to internally consistently explain this. But the point stands that they are going to be different. And I think Wes's point that the people who formed the canons of Trent would have disagreed with the people who wrote Vatican II. I think that is incontrovertible. I think the question is the development warranted and can you explain it away? And
they would have been like, what is a Jew doing here?
Right.
Right? What are you doing here?
And if you have a developed view of the development of doctrine, then you can say, well, yes, they were correct in sort of in what a lot of what they were saying, but they had some undeveloped views, undeveloped, and we are now more developed
on women, Jews, and Muslims. It's like, right. But that's the thing, though. How far back you can take development of doctrine? If you use that same rationale. It's like, okay, well, yeah, back then we couldn't we couldn't worship in the mosques and the synagogue. And, we thought that they were all going to hell and damned for worshiping demons. But now we all worship the same God. Like, how much more of a leap is it to say Muslims worshiped demons? Now they worship the same God. Women can't be priests. Women can be priests. Like, how much different is that?
They're still saying women can't be priests.
No, I know they are.
Well, I mean,
what I'm saying is, here's the difference, right?
Most of them.
So
they're getting there.
Muslims worship demons. Muslims worship God, right? That is a complete 180 in terms of a development of doctrine.
Sure. Yeah.
They're saying at this point in time, they worship demons. They worship the one true God, or they're trying to worship the one true God.
Mm-hmm.
Women can't be priests. Women can be priests. Like to me, it's like the same level. If that is your allowance for doctrine development, right? Basically a 180. Like almost anything can go at that point.
Yeah.
Right. And you could just explain it as well, really, this is a continuation of a development of our doctrine since the early church, right?
Yeah, and the
using that same
Muslims worship the same
rationalization.
God is one that really does bother me, because
Yeah.
I think that is it's an understandable mistake. Like when you hear them explain it, kind of, oh, like, if you sort of define it loosely enough, then their version of like the uncreated thing or the unmoved mover is similar to our, and you can kind of get something similar to that. But I
Yeah,
see
but
this
so's
as being
Vishnu. It's like,
yeah, right. I
Mm.
think it really just smells of modern philosophy. I think this is an area where the Catholic Church has in many ways sort of conceded to modern analytic philosophy and sort of their ideas of um, naming and sort of what it means to refer to something. And so when they're taking this concept of reference and then assigning that to this concept of worship, and I think it disturbs me because it really does seem like a capitulation to modern philosophy in a way, in an area where I think modern philosophy is just completely wrong. I think that they've just gone off the rails. I think analytic philosophy makes some serious errors when it comes to its view of language and reference and meaning. And so it seems like a totally unforced error. And I don't really have any other explanation for why the Catholic Church has taken that position, where the idea that Muslims and Christians worship the same God, except maybe in that they feel that that's necessary to also claim that Christians and Jews worship the same God, but it really isn't even necessary. Not that you have to believe that, although I think that that's a much stronger case to be made, and you can still make that case consistently without appealing to modern philosophy. But yeah, I'm very confused about the motive behind that and sort of the tradition behind that view, because it seems like a 180, and it seems like a 180 that I can't find any other explanation for except for capitulating to modern philosophy. And maybe
well,
there
and
is
I
one, but
think
I just don't see it.
I think it is the double-edged sword of infallibility, right? Because as soon as you say that the magisterium cannot teach error, while on the surface that might seem like a very strong position that your church is the one true church, it is the Achilles heel that you've just introduced to your entire system. As soon as you can find one error, it's like, well, you know, this whole system comes down. It is a deck of cards the way that they set it up, right? Now, if the church says, well, actually, you know what? We were a mistake, like they can't ever back down, right? So as soon as something is declared in an infallible fashion, whether it be an ecumenical council or whether it be just the magisterium declared or whatnot, they can't ever back down on that. Although I guess you could say that they could, considering they did a 180 on, Muslims worshiping demons. So maybe, I mean, they could, and then just claim that it was actually just a development of doctrine, just backwards, right? So imagine they just like Vatican III comes out and it erases Vatican II, or it
Well,
reinterprets Vatican II, and they're like, we weren't wrong; it was just developing.
it is amazing. The imprecision of language does allow for so much of that kind of 180 action, where you can turn things around. And because language is imprecise, we only really ever approach meanings almost like asymptotes in math. We never quite perfectly describe anything that we're trying to describe. We never perfectly communicate any meaning. We can only really ever approximate meaning. It does leave the door open to some pretty dramatic turns, and it starts to make you look pretty awkward. But you'll still probably have an out. And the Catholic Church has certainly tried a number of times. We'll see if that continues.
Yeah, word games. Word games are very fun. All right. Well, then we have a. Do we need any more from the Westhoff clip? Let me check.
Now, so yeah, I've been sort of white knighting for Catholicism in some respects, but I think it's better to let Joe Heschmeyer do the defense.
Shameless popery. All right, I think I have the timestamp pulled up right here. So he does a loving response to Wes Huff's response for not being, or sorry, reasons for not being Catholic. Now, I love this side of apologetics, dude, because it's like you have the sunshine and roses la la land of like Protestants and Catholics holding hands, right? On this side, you have like the Gavin Ortlands, the Wes Huff, you have Trent Horn, you have Joe Heschmeyer, right? They're over here in their own little like la la land. And then the other side of the internet, everyone's trying to kill each other, like metaphorically. And it's the dichotomy between these two zones is so funny to me, right? You're gonna have like Jay Dyer and Sham Shamoon and a bunch of these other guys on the killing each other side of things, and then this like, we love each other type
All
of like
loving. Yeah.
apologetics. It's very funny. The
I will
dichotomy
say,
of man.
Joe Heschmeyer is, I think, one of the worst rebuttal channels. Joe Heschmeyer is interesting if you watch some of his more original takes when he's just putting out a video on a topic that he cares about. His rebuttals are not good. I think plenty of people watch rebuttals from their favorite commentators, assuming that they're getting the original video and the rebuttal at the same time. But I've watched enough of the originals and Joe Heschmeyer's response to know that he does not do a good job actually restating the original position. He will take things, I assume unintentionally, but things the context gets lost, or he'll just misunderstand what they were saying. He'll rephrase it in a way that is certainly not what the original person was trying to communicate. And so, I if you're going to watch his rebuttals, I would highly recommend watching the original video first, because his points may be sound within Catholicism, but as a rebuttal or as an accurate depiction of the original argument, I think they often fall short.
It is rather the application of that work to our own lives. All right, Wes's seventh reason, and this is really his final reason, it involves what he calls the changing, unchanged church. And it really involves the idea of development of doctrine.
I look at this idea that the Roman Catholic Church is the true, unchanged 2,000-year-old church, and I simply look at the evidence for that, and I don't see it. I see clear developmental change.
Now, like many Protestants, Wes seems to believe the development of doctrine is some kind of 19th century invention by St. John Henry Newman to explain away the apparent contradictions Protestants claim to have found between modern Catholicism and the early church. And so Wes suggests that the fathers at Trent would never have accepted something like Newman's doctrine of development.
The polemics that took place during the Reformation taught that Roman Catholic teaching, as it was at Trent, was the universal teaching of the whole church. And that's simply false. So when you have Cardinal Henry Newman writing an essay on the development of Christian doctrine in 1848, he's outlining the parameters of why the claim of unchanged continuity isn't true. The development hypothesis undermines a unified, constant, and uniform teaching from the apostles to today. What Newman outlines is simply not the thinking of those at Trent. It isn't. They would not have agreed with Cardinal Henry Newman's thesis.
But I think Wes is just clearly wrong about this. Newman is by no means the first to talk about development of doctrine. This was a widely accepted idea. It was widely acknowledged both in the early church and in the Middle Ages. To give just a few examples, in the 4th century, St. Gregory Nazianzen pointed to the Trinity as an example of where we see development of doctrine. He wrote that the Old Testament proclaimed the Father openly and the Son more obscurely. The New Testament manifested the Son and suggested the deity of the Spirit, and then talked about how Christians were increasingly recognizing the divinity of the Holy Spirit. Now,
Well, but doesn't I don't know if that's fair to say, like a development of doctrine, more just a more formal recognition of what was rather than a true development, right? It's not as if it's like, well, there was never the Holy Spirit, and then at some point, between 33 AD and Nicaea, they were just tagged on the Holy Spirit, right?
Yeah, I'd be curious to talk to Joe about exactly what he means by development. To me, a development is an actual change in doctrine, but with an underlying unchanged higher truth, right? Like there's an ultimate truth that is being explored, and different doctrines are our attempt to encapsulate that truth, and sometimes they do actually change, and those are what we call developments. There could be other ones that are just sort of more finely developed, and I guess that would be a fair use of the term as well. But I would include actual changes in doctrine as being developments. For instance, a classic one is slavery, whereas for a long time the church did not see anything inherently wrong with slavery. Some Christians still don't. I believe personally that slavery, the idea of treating people as chattel, is an offense against the Imago Dei, and I think that is a later development that we have come to realize. The underlying truth has always been there, but there was a time when we had a doctrine that said it is okay to treat people as property, and now we say it is not okay to treat people as property. So you have an actual 180, you have an actual change in doctrine, but the underlying truth has always been there, and it was there in seed form. And has actually, further developed. So that would be the most extreme form of a development. I think Newman would go with me on that. I don't know exactly. I'd have to go back and reread my Newman to see if he would allow for actual changes. But certainly the idea, the picture that he uses is one of seed form to tree, where like a tree looks very different from a seed. But it's still
it necessarily comes out of the
keeping
other thing that's already there, right?
exactly.
There's nothing new that's being added on to. It's merely an explanation or like a growth from a certain like
right a growth. So there may be actual additions and real additions being there, but it's all in germ form in the original text. And so certainly in with only that picture, the Trinity would qualify. And other things would qualify, but I think that the larger point is that Wes is not saying that the council of, or the framers of Trent would have rejected the concept of development writ large, but more so that they would have rejected Newman's formulation, which is which is a more fleshed out idea of development that is probably a much stronger view of development than they would have accepted at Trent, and is the going model that you have in Vatican II and post Vatican II, where you have a much more robust conception of development, and that likely would have been rejected at the Council of Trent. And I think that is more what Trent is saying, not that there was no concept of development pre-Trent. And so again, I don't feel like Heschmeyer's rebuttal is really attacking the thrust of Wes's argument.
Yeah, and Wes points out a contradiction of previous doctrine. There was no contradiction ever in previous doctrine of a Trinity.
Right.
So I think Joe's kind of missing the mark in his rebuttal, specifically for this example.
Well, and it seems strange because while Wes is pointing out the differences in the idea of development of doctrine, I certainly, well, my interpretation anyways, would be that the framers of Trent would, even if they had some level of development of doctrine baked in, they would almost certainly disagree with the specifics of Vatican II, not just the allowance or the concept of development of doctrine, right?
Right.
But I wonder, from Joe's position, would they be able to disagree? If you took 15th century Council of Trent people, shoved them into Vatican II or post Vatican II, they would be able to disagree with that because they hadn't had that development of doctrine. Does that make sense? So
I think that is Joe's position. That's where I would assume that he's going. Yeah. It's like it's okay that they wouldn't have agreed because they weren't as developed, right?
Yeah. They haven't developed yet. So of course they disagree with us. Like, I don't know. That's like, again, how far back can you take that? Popes, apostles? Of course they wouldn't agree with us. They hadn't undergone the development yet. It's like, I don't know. That's sketchy territory.
Similarly, he says, you see lights breaking upon us gradually, and the order of theology, which it is better for us to keep, neither proclaiming things too suddenly, nor yet keeping them hidden to the end. In other words, the early Christians realized they did not just start out with a fully fleshed out systematic theology overnight. They knew this at the time. They didn't suddenly forget this in the Middle Ages. And in the 5th century, St. Vincent of Lorraine famously asked in the Commentarian, shall there then be no progress in Christ's church? Certainly, all possible progress. He then gives criteria to distinguish real progress from alteration of faith. Since progress required that the subject be enlarged in itself, whereas alteration, which is bad, involves the thing being transformed into something else. G.K. Chesterton put it a little more colorfully when he said, when we say that a puppy develops into a dog, we do not mean that his growth is a gradual compromise with the cat. We mean that he becomes more doggy and not less. So there's good development and bad alteration. So the idea that progress or development in theology would have been alien to the
Right, but again, if we look at Muslims worship demons versus Muslims worship the same God, that does not seem like a development. That seems like a abomination cat dog hybrid thing where we are now holding two contradictory positions in unison. You know, it's a quantum superstate. Is it true or not? Not entirely sure. Is it a dog? Is it a cat? Is it alive or dead? I don't know. Ask Schrodinger.
fathers at Trent is simply untenable historically. What Newman believed about doctrinal development was well established by the early church, 4th or 5th century at least, and was widely agreed upon, widely accepted. Now, of course, St. John Henry Newman, St. Gregory, St. Vincent, and the others who talk about doctrinal development are clear that this is about unpacking the full implications of a thing. It's not about using development as a euphemism to go from yes to no or from no to yes. So I want to address the particular contradiction West believes that he's found, and it is one that Protestants often mention and even some traditional Catholics mention as well.
Before we get to that, I am curious. Most anti-Catholic polemics are just contradictions within their system because their system says that it has no contradictions, right? It's kind of like atheists critiquing the Bible where they're like, look, there seems to be a contradiction here. So it's almost like the same level of what they're trying to do, right? If Protestants only have the Bible, all I have to do is find one contradiction in the Bible. If Protestants don't believe in Catholicism, they only have to find one contradiction within Catholicism and the whole thing comes down, right? So a lot of Catholic apologetics is just explaining supposed contradictions. That's like 90% of their job as a Catholic apologist online.
Papal lawyering, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Papal bull Unum Sanctum, issued by Pope Boniface in 1303, stated, quote, "We declare, affirm, define, and pronounce that it is absolutely necessary to salvation that every human creature should be subject to the Roman pontiff." A modern Roman Catholic teaching acknowledges that those suffering from invincible ignorance of the true religion can achieve salvation through moral readiness and faithfully fulfilling God's will through the precise mechanisms that remain unexplained. And this includes, according to the Catholic Catechism, Muslims and Jews being able to be saved even if they are outside the church. Let me read for you paragraph 841 of the Catechism. It says this, quote, "The plan of salvation also includes those who acknowledge the Creator, in the first place amongst whom are the Muslims. These profess to hold the faith of Abraham, and together with us they adore the one merciful God, mankind's judge on the last day." I'm sorry, but this is not the teaching that you find in the very clear medieval Catholic theology of extra ecclesiam nulla salus. Outside of the church, there is no salvation. It's just not the same. There's a clear change.
Pause it.
Again,
Honestly, I think that's a really good kill shot too, because if you use the verbiage, can you go back to where he pulls up that quote from the Catechism?
Yeah.
I think you said, James, they aren't specific with their language, but this is pretty specific as far as like quoting mankind's judge on last day, which in scripture quotes out Jesus being the judge on the last day, right? Not just God, God the Father, but Christ. These people do not worship Christ. They deny Christ. So like with this quote in of itself, you are contradicting scripture.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I don't like it. I mean,
yeah,
there are ways to internally make it work.
Sure,
but they amount to what John is describing. I mean, there's a term for this. It's called casuistry, where you are basically justifying. You're reasoning from your cause. You're trying. It's just rationalization. It's just justifying your position in contrary to the evidence or contrary to the apparent contradictions. You, as a more fundamental presupposition, hold that your position is correct. Therefore, whatever comes your way, you have to fit it to that position rather than being driven by the data. And we all do this to some degree. I mean, like you were saying, John, Christians do this with apparent contradictions within Scripture all the time, and some of them start to get pretty iffy. Some of the contradictions you hold, or some of the ways that we reconcile them. But it should, this practice, this casuistry, this action should make you very uncomfortable, and it does feel like Catholics have to do this a lot because of their extreme claims to infallibility. I mean, this is the reason why Christians have to do this when it comes to Scripture, because we hold the maximal view when it comes to Scripture. I mean, there are degrees of understandings about inspiration versus inerrancy and all of these things, but in general we hold Scripture in like the highest regard, and Catholics similarly have made very ultimate, maximally strong claims about the papacy and about the authority that comes with those teachings, and so they are relegated to this casuistry when it comes to when faced with the actual data. And it should make you uncomfortable. I'm not saying that there aren't ways to resolve it, but it is awkward to say the least.
I mean, I'd take it one step further when it comes to the Roman Catholic contradiction. Something I just thought about just now is this is actually a contradiction right here. So there's like levels of contradiction, right? So, for instance, the Chieti document, which is a modern document, acknowledges the fact that the early church in the first millennium did not operate the Roman pontiff did not operate in a universal manner. He did not have universal jurisdiction, which is then contradicting the 1302 Unum Sanctum, saying that every necessary for salvation, every human creature has to be subject to the Roman pontiff, which is contradicting. So it's like there's levels of contradictions within this dating back, since the beginning of the church. It's like popes are above councils, but a council has excommunicated a pope. It's like there's so many levels to this nonsense that you have to, again, like you said, casuistry. I
believe it's how it's pronounced.
Casuistry. Yeah, so
I guess
anything
to
has
try
to be
and
rationalized back.
steelman the Catholic position, I suppose, is that the Chieti and Alexandria documents they're not part of the magisterium or anything. They're just synodal documents.
You could get away with that had not both the last two popes said that they endorsed them, which makes them part of normative teachings for the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's like, it's weird because Joe would have to say, I disagree with Pope Francis about this.
Yeah.
He's actually wrong about the Chieti document.
Mm-hmm.
And I am correct. I am my own Pope. I am now interpreting his statements, infallibly or something like that.
To hold the faith of Abraham, and together with us they adore the one merciful God, mankind's judge on the last day. I'm sorry, but this is not the teaching that you find in the very clear medieval Catholic theology of extra ecclesiam nulla salus. Outside of the church, there is no salvation. It's just not the same. There's a clear change.
Again, the standard should not be change, but contradiction. Properly understood, there is simply no contradiction here. But this involves making important theological distinctions, particularly between those who knowingly and intentionally reject the Catholic Church and those who do so in ignorance, because theologians have long talked about invincible ignorance. For a thing to be mortally sinful, there must be grave matter, but there also must be knowledge and
I almost dislike this because he's introducing mortal sins as a category, and I'm like, nobody agrees on whether or not that's actually a real category. So you're like presupposing that is true, when that seems to be another contradiction of the early church.
But see that he's doing something similar to what I was doing with slavery, where now he's saying like, well, now you have this concept of invincible ignorance, which is a very old concept. So that's kind of like the uncontradictory principle. And he's saying that you can now apply this to this apparent change where you have, Muslims worship demons and Muslims worship the same God. But it's like, well, there's a certain level of invincible ignorance that allows for a Muslim to maybe worship the same God. And yet some Muslims are worshiping demons if they were doing so with full knowledge. So you can make it work. you can force it to fit within your paradigm, but it should make you uncomfortable.
Yeah, more than uncomfortable, I would say. At least for most people. I don't know. That maybe people can deal with more cognitive dissonance than I think that I can, or maybe I'm just being hubristic here. But I'm
I mean,
like,
from personal experience, I felt a little bit more than uncomfortable. I felt enough for me to leave. That's where
right.
I'm at. Yeah.
Intent. That is not some new church teaching at Vatican II. That is rather moral theology rooted in Scripture. Jesus cries out, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.
Wait, I'm sorry. But so Muslims don't believe that he died on a cross. So he's referring to the people like specifically crucifying him, right? And showing mercy to them in this way. And then you're copy and pasting this onto all Muslims generically?
No, he's abstracting a concept of invincible ignorance from this and other passages, and then he's applying that to Muslims generally.
Yeah, it's a bit of a far stretch.
Right. Does invincible ignorance apply here, or is this just Christ showing his grace and mercy in like one of the most traumatic experiences a human can have, right? I mean, this is such an example of grace and mercy here, as it should make us all like, sad, right? Because this is essentially us doing this, right? I don't know if this is invincible ignorance. That's not what I get out of it, at least.
I mean, I think that the concept, this could be one bit of evidence in favor of the concept of invincible ignorance. Not that that's a doctrine that I subscribe to by that name. I think that there is some truth to the underlying idea, that we are held to a greater level of accountability based on our knowledge. Although I certainly would not phrase it as invincible by virtue of our lack of knowledge. I think that is taking the concept too far. And I'm not saying that's exactly what Catholics do, but that's the way that it's named. That's the way it seems to be applied. Yeah, it's, I think this is one bit of data in support of that general concept of your level of knowledge does contribute to your level of culpability.
Right. I'm just maybe the disconnect that I'm getting is how this quote here is analogous necessarily to that. I could see how you could connect them, but I'm not sure. I mean, maybe I'm misinterpreting it, but it doesn't seem to be analogous to invincible ignorance, more just mercy and forgiveness, right?
Yeah, just praying for sinners, right? I don't know how that applies to. I don't know. Maybe
For they know not what they do. I mean, if that's the reason for the forgiveness, then that's the connection. It's not a fully fleshed out doctrine, but it's data in favor of the idea.
It's why St. Paul can say that the times of ignorance God overlooked when he's addressing the pagans in Acts 17. And contrary to what West claims, Vatican II actually reaffirms that a knowing rejection of the Catholic Church is damnable. Lumen Gentium teaches that whosoever, therefore, knowing that the Catholic Church was made necessary by Christ, would refuse to enter or to remain in it, could not be saved. Okay, then, what about this language of the plan of salvation, including Muslims and others? And what do we make of that?
See, but even that just seems to just contradict Nostra Aetate. So that's just Lumen Gentium and Nostra Aetate seemingly having or being at odds in some way. Because I don't know about you, like Catholics are still the largest single denomination of Christians in the world. So, I mean, I guess I'm skeptical at the claim that most people are ignorant of the Catholic Church as a whole, especially if you have any understanding about faith or like from almost any religion. I'd be shocked if you didn't know about the Catholic Church. So, or maybe you just don't know about specific claims of the Catholic Church, and that would make you invincible according to Lumen Gentium.
There's a lot of leeway when it comes to these concepts of like invincible ignorance and even ideas like mortal sin. Like I remember I watched a video where it was Father Rippinger. I forget his name. Yeah, demon caster out or
Yeah,
person
okay,
that we
yeah,
watched
yeah.
earlier. Exorcist. There we go. That's the official term.
Demonologist.
Yeah, talking to. It wasn't Sean Ryan, but it was some other guy. But he was talking to a Catholic. No, yeah, he was talking to a Catholic lawyer of some sort, who I had not seen before. But they were discussing the high standard that mortal sin seems to hold. In other words, you have to do something with full knowledge of the sin that you're committing. And it's like, well, do we ever really have full knowledge of that sin? So do you ever actually cross that threshold, except in very extreme cases? We're always sort of committing sin with in a state of having been deceived by the devil in some degree. So the point is, I'm not saying that that's the official endorsed view of the Catholic Church, that you can't commit mortal sins. But there's a lot of leeway within these terms in terms of, depending on how far you take them. And one could almost within the teaching of the Catholic Church come to a position where it's like, oh, it's actually really, really hard to commit a mortal sin. And you could potentially justify this with Catholic teaching. So again, I'm just the imprecise language that we have to use to communicate any meaning leaves the door open for a lot of different interpretations, and that's where we always have that interpretive gap. We always have to deal with the personal element of trying to understand what any of these things mean, because again, language is imprecise. Meaning is always going to be approached asymptotically. It's always going to be approached in an approximative fashion.
Right, but I feel like that almost works against Catholics, because one of the draws to Catholicism is the infallibility, is the we have everything figured out, we have a magisterium, we have all the answers, but then you get into it and any contradiction can be interpreted away, or it's so what I'm saying is that like the theology almost becomes so nebulous and amorphous as to not take a strong position on anything. So any one sentence or any one, piece of doctrine or dogma can be manipulated to where it fits within the greater whole and doesn't contradict, right?
No, I totally agree with
enough.
this. I think that the practical view of Catholicism as being like the safe faith is just not justified at all. I think that a lot of people feel safe because it's old and because it seems to have this level of earthly authority. That just it feels secure, but I think ultimately it just, when you just blow on it, it just kind of crumbles away. Like I think in the end, the same problems that everyone else has to deal with when it comes to these elements of personal interpretation and personal understanding, and they come for us all. And so when people make sort of the practical appeal for why, Protestantism doesn't make any sense because how can you know anything? It's like, well, we really are all in a pretty similar boat here, and you're not much better. That's been my experience. That particular apologetic method doesn't work at all on me. I do not see the same security that people see in the Catholic Church.
Mhm. Yeah, it seems like a really strong position on the outside, right? It's like return to Rome, jangling the keys, so to speak. And then you look a little deeper and it's like, well, it's kind of an amorphous blob under the surface.
Yeah, the appeal is the same appeal of the guy in college who's really, really confident about all of his ideas. There's a certain appeal to all the people that aren't as confident to follow in that person's footsteps, right? If you're not sure about your ideas and you have this one person says, I am very confident and this is what you should believe, it's very easy to just fall in line. And that's easier. And so that's the practical appeal. Is it, well, it's easier. But is it more justified? Is it better? Certainly not in that case. You can easily follow someone who is confident but wrong. And I think that the same risk is there when it comes to the Catholic Church.
The plan of salvation is that God our Savior desires all men to be saved and to come to the knowledge of the truth. Saying that God's plan of salvation includes everybody doesn't mean that we believe they're all in fact saved or that they're all already saved. It's rather a reminder when we evangelize that God desires that person to be saved and is already at work in their life in some way, and then our job is to see Where do we already agree? What are they already getting right? What is the area God's already spoken to them in some way so that we can build from that in proclaiming the gospel? It's not a sign that, well, the plan of salvation includes everyone, so therefore we don't preach to anyone. That would be a contradiction, but it's not what Vatican II teaches. West concludes his argument by saying that being a biblically based faithful Christian will make you a bad Roman Catholic and vice versa. But as I hope I've shown here, that's simply not true. There are good biblical reasons the Catholics believe everything we believe on each of the issues he takes issue with. And in each of the cases, church history and the testimony of the earliest Christians is on our side as well. It agrees with our interpretation of Scripture, not Wes's more novel interpretation. And I think that's important because Wes claims he's a convictional Protestant because of church history. If somebody said that they're a flat earther because they're a scientist who's looked at the science, you would reasonably conclude from those words that science somehow proves a flat earth. Likewise, when Wes claims that he's a convictional Protestant because of church history and then lays out these objections, you might naively think that he means that church history is on his side. But as I think I've sketched out for each and every one of these issues, church history speaks against him. He thinks the early Christians got each of these issues wrong. He is arguing against the early.
You know what we need is, okay, so the original video was 46 minutes long, which is actually quite a long video. This one's 57 minutes. But now I need the response to the response, okay? And
Like
it's
2
gonna
hours
be
long.
2 hours, at least 2 hours long, okay? And then the responses, and just keep going ad infinitum. I think that would be a very useful use of everyone's time. I mean, it is calling him the flat earther of apologetics is quite a take. I think that's quite funny.
Probably not fair.
Yeah, probably not super fair. Even maybe a little disingenuous, some might say. You know, especially when you're the quote unquote loving response. Hey, I think this guy's retarded.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't much like Joe's rebuttals. I think that they tend to be, especially when he does, because he will do like the rebuttal to the rebuttal to the rebuttal, and they start to get into some, personal issues. Like he had this whole spat with Gavin about a particular thing, and in my estimation, I think Joe was in the wrong. He just was accusing Gavin of altering a text, and it's like Gavin's like, no, I cut the text short with an ellipses. That's acceptable scholarship where you just quote part of the passage and leave off some of it, and it ended up being, but like it got personal and in the weeds. But even just in his initial responses, Joe tends to be he doesn't do a great job of trying to actually empathize with the original person, which is the most important thing when it comes to a rebuttal, is to not straw man the argument, to actually take their argument as they're presenting it in its strongest form, steel man it, and then break down the steel man. And Joe very rarely does that. He tends to construct straw men and then break them down in very basic terms with rather low tier arguments, which is frustrating because he's a lawyer and he's a smart guy and he's got good arguments on his side, but he just his rebuttals tend to be very weak. All right, well, that is everything that I think we had on the docket. Do you guys have any other clips or any other topics?
No, I think that's everything I had. Christian, did you have something else that you wanted to go over?
No, I don't think so.
All right, good deal. Well, thanks for sticking with us, guys. I know we were counter-programming Hop and Brock for part of this, so I think our numbers kind of reflected that. But we do appreciate all of you being here. Next week, we will have our Super Chats back, which is a good thing.
Oh, sweet.
But yeah, I mean, thank you guys. We have surpassed the 1,000 mark, and we're continuing to grow. We really appreciate all of your continued support and viewership. And yeah, if you have any questions or topics that you want us to cover, feel free to email us at regardingdoubt@gmail.com or drop it in a Ko-Fi message or whatever you want. We will we read all of those, and we do appreciate everything you guys do. All right. I don't have anything else.
One.
Well,
What's
actually,
that?
yeah, I was about to say,
Oh, really?
Jared just
Oh.
sent one in.
Nice. Well, I appreciate that. Let me. Can you pull them up, John, or do I need to pull it up?
I have it right here. Yeah. So it says, even as a Catholic, I appreciate what you do, gents. Christ is King and God is good. Thank you very much, Jared. I appreciate that, good sir.
Yeah, I feel like we need to get a Catholic as a regular on this stream. Now that
Sorry,
Christian,
guys.
you're kind of abandoning the
Well,
Catholic
it's funny
post
that
here.
it'll end up being one Protestant and 2 Orthodox in like a year. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So,
guys.
And then 2 years
we'll
from now,
figure
it'll be
something
3
out.
Orthodox
At the
people.
beginning of this, you're like, we need an ortho guy. Yeah.
Just turns into another
Anyways.
Ortho Bro show. It's like, okay.
Oh well. So yes, we're taking calls, or there's an opening for a Catholic on this stream if you're watching. All right, guys. Well, appreciate you all. John, Christian, thanks for hanging out. Everyone, God bless. Have a good night.
Good night, fellas.
Have a good night, gents. Appreciate y'all.